Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something that sounds, well, a little dry government special accounts, but I promise, how you think about them is about to change. We're calling this the time speed of money. If you've ever read about public finance, anywhere in the world, really, you've heard of these things. They sit outside the main budget, and almost always the language used to describe them is suspicious. Words like opaque, secretive, some people even jump straight to dark money. The very fact that they're separate makes people think something must be wrong. But our goal today isn't to judge. We want to look at this purely from an institutional design perspective. Why would a government that claims to want transparency deliberately create these separate financial buckets?
It does seem counterintuitive, doesn't it?
Completely.
But that's only if you start from the assumption that the main budget, the general account, is the right tool for every single job. And that's the analytical trap. The issue isn't really good versus bad. It's about structural management. And more than anything, it's about the profound conflict in the speed of time.
The speed of time.
Yeah, think about it. The government is this massive, massive organization. Some of its work happens right now, paying salaries, disaster relief. But other projects have to span decades. Building a national highway network, managing pensions, things like that.
So you have a deep-sea submarine and a Formula One car, and you're trying to make them use the same engine.
That's a perfect analogy. The main budget, the general account, is that F1 engine. It's built for speed, for annual accountability, high velocity. But if you force a deep-sea project, say a decade-long infrastructure trust, to run at that speed with all the starting and stopping, you just destroy the project. So for this deep dive, we're going to use a framework called Government Organizational Analysis, GOA. And instead of seeing these accounts as some kind of national secret, we're going to zoom in and look at them ministry by ministry and translate them into a much simpler idea: groups of long-term business centers.
Okay, let's unpack this, because calling them business centers is a huge shift. It immediately takes it out of the world of politics and into the world of management.
It does. And if we stick with that corporate analogy, I think the whole logic behind these special accounts becomes much clearer for you, the listener. So just imagine the state is a huge company.
Okay.
The different ministries, transport, health, you name it. Those are your big divisions or departments. And the general account, that big annual budget that Parliament fights over, that's your head office management accounting. Very strict, very controlled, demands a report every single year.
And the special accounts, then, are the specialized units, like the internal R&D lab or the pension management arm that needs its own set of books.
Exactly. They're the business centers inside those divisions. And they need that protection from the head office's annual demands because they're just running on a totally different clock.
Yeah.
So the real difference here, the core of it, isn't about transparency. It's about the velocity gap between political time and project time.
Tell me more about that velocity gap, because it still seems like extra work. Why create a whole separate structure if you don't have to?
You only create it when you absolutely have to. The source material we looked at lays out 3 conditions that basically force a project into a special account. First, the project simply cannot be finished within 1 fiscal year.
Right, building a new aircraft carrier or something.
Exactly. You can't do that in 12 months. And if you had to go back to the general account every single year to beg for your funding, subject to the political winds, the project would either never finish or it would cost a fortune in delays and inefficiency.
That makes a lot of sense. The uncertainty of the annual budget would just cripple anything that moves slowly.
It would.
Okay.
Okay, second condition. The project can't be directly subjected to market principles. This is that public service aspect.
Like Social Security.
A national pension fund is the classic example. It's operating on decades-long timelines. But its whole reason for being is policy, not profit. It has to be stable, continuous, and protected from the temptation to raid the funds for some shiny new project this year.
And the third one?
Its operation is tightly linked to a very specific, often complex, policy goal. Think of something like a forestry management trust. It has to manage sustainable logging over, say, 50 years, balancing conservation and commercial use. You can't manage that with a simple line item in an annual budget. You need a dedicated financial and management structure.
What's fascinating here is that this isn't some weird isolated thing. This kind of institutional design pops up everywhere, right?
Globally. Any large organization, public or private, has to figure out how to shield its critical, slow-moving assets from the fast-paced, day-to-day decision-making. The special account is just the government's way of doing that.
Which brings us to why the ministries themselves love them so much.
It does. It leads directly to what we can call the interest layer, or the I layer. The very rational reasons they fight so hard to keep them.
So if a ministry is acting rationally to protect its long-term goals, what are they really getting out of having one of these business centers?
They're getting 3 huge wins. And all of them are about managing the risk that comes from short-term political time. The first one is just temporal budget stability.
Yeah.
With a special account, they get to skip that painful political annual budget review. They have their own dedicated funding source that runs on its own timeline.
That's huge. I mean, that's the difference between begging for a grant every 6 months and having a locked-in 5-year budget. You can actually do the work.
You can actually do the work. The second gain is securing discretion. In the main budget, every penny is scrutinized. With a special account, the ministry gets flexibility. If they need to shift funds from one part of a big project to another, they can just do it. They don't have to wait months for some external approval. They get to actually manage.
Operational freedom.
Exactly. And the third gain, and this might be the most important one, is the self-reproduction of expertise. By controlling a stable, long-term pot of money, the ministry can build and keep its expert teams, its know-how, its contractor networks. It knows those specialized jobs won't vanish in the next budget cut.
So these aren't necessarily signs of something corrupt. They're defense mechanisms. The ministry is just protecting its people and its mission from the chaos.
It's protecting them from time compression. That's a great way to put it. The general account resets to 0 every year. Special accounts, though, are earmarked. The money is tied to that specific mission for years, even decades. The whole structure is designed to protect necessary work that just can't survive a short-term evaluation.
Okay, but this brings us full circle to the perception problem. If this is all so rational and necessary, why do these accounts always seem so opaque? Where does that feeling come from?
It comes from the side effects of that protection. That opacity is a structural distortion. Because the accountability clock is so long, sometimes decades long, the account naturally starts to pull away from outside scrutiny. You see 2 big distortions. First, the project's original goal can kind of morph into a self-purpose.
Meaning?
Meaning the account starts to exist just to keep itself going, to sustain the expertise inside it, rather than to achieve its original mission. It just becomes a permanent part of the furniture.
The business center forgets why it was founded. Or maybe its job is done, but it keeps on running because it has its own money.
Precisely. And second, because surplus funds just circulate inside that protective shell, there's naturally less oversight from the central government's auditors who are focused on the massive general account. And that lack of visibility gets interpreted as secrecy. So the opacity isn't necessarily planned. It's more of a structural reaction. It's the defense mechanism hardening over time.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. If these things create so much friction and look so bad, why is reform so hard? I mean, the common reaction is always just get rid of them, shut them down.
And that takes us right back to the corporate analogy. Think about it. When a company shuts down a specialized long-term R&D division, you don't just cut bad spending.
No, you often kill the core function entirely. The knowledge walks out the door, the team is gone.
The institutional memory is just erased. And that's the point. The sheer rigidity, the hardness of a special account that people see as stubbornness or incompetence, it's completely misinterpreted.
How so?
The key insight here is that the hardness is not a flaw. It's a feature. It is a protective shell. And it was built that way on purpose. It was designed to guard a fragile, long-term project from what the source material calls the shearing force of short-term political evaluation. If you just abolish the account, you're exposing that fragile thing to immediate destruction. The rigidity is the defense.
Wow. Okay, that totally reframes the entire debate on reform. So if just shutting them down is destructive, what does real, meaningful reform actually look like?
Well, first, it's not total abolition. And it's definitely not complete, unqualified exposure to that political meat grinder of the annual budget. That would be just institutional self-sabotage. Real reform under this GOA framework starts by acknowledging their nature as business centers. You accept the legitimate job they do while you work to restore their reversibility.
Reversibility. What does that mean in practice?
It means building in mechanisms so that the government can rethink, adjust, or even sunset these accounts when their job is done without instantly destroying the function. It means you build in, say, a deep dive review every 5 years, a review that operates on project time, not political time. You're essentially building off-ramps into the structure itself.
So you're restoring oversight, but in a way that respects the timeline of the project.
Exactly. You give the central government control back without using the one tool, the annual budget, that these things were built to get away from in the first place.
That makes so much sense. We've really shifted the perspective here. We went from judging them, good or bad, to understanding the institutional logic behind why they exist and why they act the way they do.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this GOA view gives us the right tools. We can stop asking, is it transparent or opaque, and start asking better questions. Like first, which ministry's interest layer has become too strong? Is the account serving the policy, or is the policy now just serving the account? Second, how long has its time axis been fixed? Is it so rigid that it can't adapt to anything? And third, what is its actual sensitivity to external change? Is it completely insulated?
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? While this framework gives you a way to think about reform surgically, instead of taking a sledgehammer to public finance, we can see where we need to make careful changes, maybe reintegrate an account or redesign it or give it a sunset clause. But you can do all that without destroying the necessary public functions these accounts were created to protect.
That's the goal, surgical precision. And thinking this way just fundamentally changes how you read the headlines about government spending. So to leave you with a final thought, just reflect on this. The next time you hear about some controversial government financial structure, pause for a second. Ask yourself, which long-term projects really do need this kind of deep protection from short-term political noise to actually succeed? And on the flip side, where has that protective shell maybe outlived its purpose and just become self-serving? Are we sometimes just a little too quick to label necessary organizational complexity as simple opacity?
A lot to think about there. The challenge of balancing that long-term stability with short-term accountability might be the biggest puzzle in all of public finance. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you'll keep thinking about time, speed, and money.